I've been reading the books, the Saga of the Unfated, so it's a duology, and the first one is A Fate Inked in Blood. The second one is A Curse Carved in Bone. Nice sprayed edges here. So in this second book, there's a cabin that they visit. It's really not that integral to the story. I just felt like I had a really clear vision of what this looked like. For whatever reason, this cabin had a very detailed description in the book. It almost feels kind of random that there was so much description of this cabin. So today's speed build is going to be this cabin from A Curse Carved in Bone. You definitely do not need to be reading or have any interest in this book to enjoy this video. It's really just like a Viking witch cabin. So I looked up some Viking architecture, and these are some of the pictures I found. I really don't know the extent of it. I didn't do that much research, but here's what I've come up with. I did make a sim to go in this cottage. She is described as well. I will not say her name. I'm not giving any information about the story here, not trying to give anything away here, so really just made a sim the way they described her, and that's all the information you'll get about the cabin and that. Here's our sim, here's our lady. I've named her Mysterious Lady. So mysterious. So she lives in a cabin in the woods, far away from everyone. Brief little summary of what the books are about if you are interested. So the books take place in a Nordic culture, definitely based on some Viking and Norse mythology throughout the books, and this is on the back cover of the first book, so I'm not giving anything away here. But there are people in these books who are touched by the gods, and so they'll have a drop of blood from the Norse gods like Thor and Odin, and you know the gang that I'm talking about. So those people have special powers relating to those gods. So that's just a general idea of the books. They're very good, definitely recommend, but I'm still working my way through the second one. So we're going to build deep in the woods of Winterberg. Here's some of the description that inspired this build. It was only one room, though there were touches of wealth. There was a multitude of thick pelts, quality pots hanging near the hearth, and richly colored hangings on the walls that appear to be from the south. The cabin itself was made of thick logs with a thatched roof, and then they mention smoke coming from the center of the roof. So I put a chimney in the center of the roof instead of off to the side like I normally would, because I believe these buildings would have been built so the smoke would go right to the middle and to the top, right? I don't know. Makes sense to me. In my head, it makes sense. So anyways, we're going to put a chimney right in the middle of the roof. There's a well-made table with 2 benches that dominates the space. To one side, a curtain hung from the ceiling to hide away the sleeping area. Dried herbs covered one wall. No signs of livestock. So that's the main structure. A little later, there is mention of a sauna, so I did make another little building over to the side, which you'll see. It's described as having a turf roof, so it blends into the surroundings. So I got to use the new Enchanted by Nature grass roof. I don't know how people of this period went to the bathroom, and weirdly, it's not talked about much in the books. So I've just thrown an outhouse out here so that Sims can go. I don't really know if they would use a chamber pot situation or if they would just go out in the woods. I don't know. But I decided to add a little outhouse from what was the event? The Nature's Calling. So the Nature's Calling event. I tried not to include any major, I didn't officially make this build off the grid, but I tried to make it look off the grid, I do not know a lot about Viking culture or architecture, so I did my best. That's all I can say. Really just tried to keep it very, like I said, unofficially off the grid, but also thinking about the fact that it would get really cold here, so I used windows that would close instead of trying to bring in light. I feel like they would probably want to keep out the cold more so I've used these island living windows that can close fully. So I did put a fireplace in the middle because there's multiple references to a fire. I don't quite know where the fire is, but I figure if the smoke is going out of the middle of the roof, then the fire has to be in the middle of the floor. So we have a fire pit in the middle of the building. In the game, this might catch fire to the things around it, but there we go. Finally got a chance to use some of the Enchanted by Nature stuff, which I feel like is working out really well. So I've sectioned off the bed area. I decided to make it on a platform because I feel like that helps to kind of make it like a separate room without making it a separate room. You know. And then I've used multiple layers of curtains because, again, I feel like you'd be wanting to keep in the warmth. There's really no mention of books or reading in any form in these books, so I decided to forego a bookshelf. I don't think I've ever done a build without a bookshelf. Got to use the horse ranch curtains that I hardly ever use because they're not really my style, but I feel like they work in this case. And I tried, the book does describe 2 benches on either side of the table, but I really just couldn't get that to look nice because the only benches I have just are too like thick. They're the horse ranch ones. They just didn't look good, and they're not long enough. They're not like a long bench. I've just gone with some very natural looking wood stuff, and then we have our wall of dried herbs. And then I've just gone with like any cloth wall hanging I could find. They're definitely more, you know, there's some from Horse Ranch that are more like Western US, like Native American, that kind of thing. And then there's also some from Island Living that are obviously not Viking-y, but you know, I don't have a Viking pack, so I've tried to make do where I could, okay? And since it does mention some colorful wall hangings, I've used these ones from Jungle Adventure that I absolutely love. Any chance to use those, I'm down for that. And then I thought this gallery wall from Enchanted by Nature looks pretty cute in here. Looks very like natural, like stuff you could make from things you find in the forest or something. And I love these chairs from Snowy Escape because they have the like fur blankets on them, so I feel like those work sometimes in cabin-y settings or like old-fashioned settings because you imagine that they would have like real fur pelts and stuff. We can see that I have the grass on the roof of our little sauna over to the right. I felt like a cabin like this would have livestock, and I had planned to put like chickens here or something, and then I reread the description and it specifically mentions that there's no signs of livestock, so no animals. I've used this tree from Enchanted by Nature because there are runes carved on the entrance to this cabin, so I thought that kind of represented a little magic touch and like wards, that kind of thing. Tried to make it look rustic by just adding a few buckets and things like that around. And then of course the basket of cozies, because what build doesn't need that? It's also mentioned that she has a lot of like expensive wine, so even though she lives out here in a cabin, she's well off. So I've brought some crates of wine here for her and some boxes of like fruit. You know, if she doesn't have livestock, she's gotta get her food somehow. Feels like simpler times now when I think back to this part of the book. So much has happened. This is in the distant past now. It's so good though. Really loving it. I still have a little ways to go. Let's see. I'm about like 2/3 of the way through maybe. But anyways, highly recommend. I did give her a bathtub. Our Sims need one. I would imagine that she would have some kind of receptacle for water to bathe in. And then I just added a bucket there and some towels. I did add a few of the gardening pots outside. I figured she might need to do a little gardening to get some herbs or something like that. I really like a lot of the Horse Ranch and Enchanted by Nature stuff, and I feel like it worked really well together here. As far as the outside, like the roof and all that, you know, I got this from just looking up pictures of Viking architecture. I really don't know if a structure this small would need 1 million columns, but I don't know. I was just going off the pictures I found and decided to roll with it. I love the way this little sauna turned out. So I wanted the house to be medium wall height, and then I wanted the sauna to be shorter. So what I actually did was I built a room, built a second floor, deleted the first floor, and then pushed that second floor down. And so this sauna is technically a second floor room. So it is a little tricky to like see when you're on the first floor of the other building. You won't really see the sauna. It's also a very modern sauna because in the game we have the saunas from the Spa Day pack. I would imagine in that culture, in that time, it probably would have been like a fire pit with rocks in a bucket on top that you put water on and stools or something like that. But hey, we've got a fancy sauna here. I bet she won't complain about that. Just added some gardening tools and various things outside to make it look a little lived in. I did upload this to the gallery if you're interested. I did add a water trough because although I don't believe she has horses, the people who come to see her do have horses, so they tie them up somewhere. So I don't know, I just added a water trough here. But I feel like this build has captured the essence of like a mysterious kind of witch who lives in the woods far from everyone, but she's made her space really nice. Look at her pouring herself a cup of tea in her little clay teapot. I added the clay oven thing that's base game so that the Sims can actually cook in here. But yeah, I just think it turned out so cute. So there's our Viking witch cottage. I hope that you've enjoyed the build and that you also will consider reading these books. If you've already read them and you want to talk about them, you can always message me on Instagram or comment below and risk spoiling it for someone. But that's their problem. They should have read the books. I don't know. Let me know if there's any other book builds you want to see. Obviously, I would love to try something like the House of Wind or the Townhouse from A Court of Thorns and Roses, or the Spring Court, things like that. There's some really big, ambitious builds that I have in my mind that I'm just not sure I really want to tackle. Something like this. A little nicer. I was literally reading this book, and as I was reading this part, I was like, I want to make this in The Sims. And I had to stop and somewhat build it in The Sims, but I've read more since then. Oh, and look, we can call on, what is he? Oh, Spruce Almighty. Guess this story could go in a different direction. So that's it for today. Short speed build, but this was really fun to build, different from some of the things I normally do. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. I gotta go read more of this book, so bye.